closing government CMU VZ, and closing opposition Cornell AK. Okay, you're all here. So it was a very good debate. It was very close, and as a result, there was a split panel. The judges were unanimous in putting closing opposition Cornell AK through. But there was then a lengthy discussion about how to place the final team going through, the second place. And on a 3-2 split, it eventually went to the closing government, CMU VZ.
I would also like to thank all the teams in our... Okay, CMU, chill. I would also like to thank all the teams in semifinal 2 for an excellent debate. I just want to make a roll call. On first proposition, CMU team. On first op, Georgetown team. Second prop, Cornell team. And second op, Texas team. Okay. So going through unanimously is the team from first opposition, Georgetown. And going through on a split decision is team from second proposition, Cornell.
So debaters, coaches, judges, and members of the QUDL community, I have the honor of welcoming you all to the closing ceremony of the 7th Qatar Universities Debate League Nationals. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to the visitors we have with us today from Kuwait University. We're grateful to have you here. During this debate season, the Qatar University's debate circuit has seen 83 debaters and 28 novices from 7 different universities: CMU, CNAQ, Georgetown, QU, Stendon, Texas A&M, and Cornell participating in leagues. We have also grown, and we now have workshops on a regular basis with debate societies from Calgary, QAC, QCC, and Northwestern University. And after this long season and all these debaters, here we are, wrapping up the season. Before we begin the finals, and whilst I have all of your attention, I'd like to make a few thank yous to those who've helped to make this possible. Firstly, on behalf of QD, I'd like to express our gratitude to the coaches, debaters, and judges who spend their time making sure that their societies at the universities run, that you come here and that you participate. We appreciate your time, dedication, enthusiasm, and support. Furthermore, we'd like to thank the volunteers from QD and for all of our events this year. Importantly, the QD support staff has gave me this role, and I tend to get names wrong and swap them around and forget ones. But from communications, Ali Sultan, thank you. From events, Jamal Al-Bakr. Business support, Hassan Suleiman. Programs, Dr. Abdul Latif. The entire English program team, for all of your hard work, in particular Tasnim, who really made all of this come together today, and Arina and Abdur, who's joined us and assisted us throughout. And of course, Dr. Hyatt, without whose support, this couldn't happen. It is because of the combined effort and support of all of you that we're here this evening for the grand final. Lastly, congratulations to everyone who's participated over the course of the year, but also at Nationals today. In the end, there are 4 teams in front of us who are going to battle it out to be crowned the champions in the finals. But over the past 4 rounds in the semi-finals, you've all participated. Having been here for a very short while, I'm already proud to be part of this QUDL community. It really is something special. And now, without any further delay, I'd like to call the chair of the debate for tonight, Tasnim Elias, to ask the teams to come forward.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the grand final. I'd like to thank all the teams for participating in the tournament. I think they've all done a wonderful job. But the last 4 teams we'd like to commemorate, and I'd like to invite in opening government, Cornell University. Cornell University is being represented by Ms. Farah Al-Sayed and Mr. Muntasir Al-Tohami. In opening opposition, we have Georgetown University. Representing Georgetown, we have Mr. Sarim Zia and Ms. Arwa Al-Sanosi. In closing government, we have CMU. CMU is represented by Mr. Zuhair Syed and Ms. Valerie. Last but not least, closing opposition, we have Cornell University. Cornell is represented by Mr. Hayyan and Mr. Ahmed Al-Mir. I would also like to introduce you to our judging panel for today. With me, I have an excellent panel. I have Mr. Abdurrahman, a visiting coach, Mr. Ahmed Medani, Mr. Alex Dieger, Mr. Ali Al-Suwaidi, Ms. Arina Najwa, a visiting coach, Ms. Maya Zimmerman, and that will be the chair for this round. I'm Ms. Tasneem Ilyas. Just to give you brief rules about the tournament, about the debate today, speakers will speak for 7 minutes. After the first minute, they will hear a bell. After the 6th minute, they will hear a bell. And at the 7th minute, they will hear 2 bells signaling the end of their speeches. Without further ado, the motion for today's debate: this House believes that Palestinians should not accept citizenship from Arab nations. This House believes that Palestinians should not accept citizenship from Arab nations. I'd like to begin the debate by calling on our Prime Minister for today, Ms. Farah Al-Sayed.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like you to imagine a world where citizens scattered across the world in random nations all around, giving up their citizenships, giving up their sense of security in a country, their allegiance to a country, giving all that up and coming together to form a nation. I want you to imagine that world. Well, it's a true story. That's how Israel was formed. And what we see here is the exact opposite happening. We're seeing the disintegration of a nation due to the scattering and division of the people in Palestine. So first and foremost, I will define the motion. We are not restricting the freedom of movement of Palestinians. They are allowed to go to different nations. They can obtain residencies, but they cannot obtain citizenships. They cannot be under the legal protection of a country, and they have to maintain their own Palestinian identification. Like, as Palestinians have passports or an identification that claims them as Palestinians, and we want them to maintain that identity. So what's the problem that we have? As I have already mentioned, we have a disintegrating ideology of forming a Palestinian state. What Israel aims to do, it makes it very difficult, first, for people to move in and out of Israel. It puts up borders to divide the people within, and it's also doing that from afar. By passing this motion, we are ruining the effects of that, and I'll show you how it's doing this from afar. Because especially now, we're at a turning point where Palestine, no thank you, where Palestine has been proclaimed as an observership state. But we think that in the long run, if a two-state solution is to come up, Palestine is not ready for this because there's a division. The people are not unified towards the ideology of a Palestinian state. And we are not ready for this simply because the Palestinians are elsewhere in different nations, working for different countries, under the citizenship of different countries. And there are certain dangers that have come up with that. There's a complacency. The further generations don't understand what the cause is for Palestine. And I will show you what the effects are currently and what we're trying to move through with our model. But first, I will take your point.
Madam, the question is then, the Palestinian people under the status quo are stateless. Thus, they have no sense of identification, and you are refusing to giving them that. Why so?
Okay, so then a further clarification is that I am a Palestinian and I am a citizen of Kuwait. So Palestinians that have left from 1948 and have migrated into different countries, now over the years, over 5-10 years, who are currently maybe stateless, but when they move out to different countries, no thank you, they obtain the citizenship from other countries. And the fact that they are stateless is a problem that we should be addressing rather than avoiding from. There are people there that need to be protected. The people there are not being represented because everyone's leaving. Who is condemning Israel for treading on other people's territories? Who's condemning Israel for not agreeing to the treaties that they have signed that they cannot build on certain lands? All the bright minds have left. There's no one else there. All the bright minds have left, and they are now working and producing for other countries. We're saying that we're trying to move towards a two-nation state.
On that point,
the resolution. No, I will not be taking any more of your points. So the problem that I've presented for you is that Palestine is not ready for a two-nation state. And we have a death of the idea of a Palestinian nation, which is not what we want. The stakeholder in this case is the Palestinian individual. So as a Palestinian with a cause and a home to fight for, I should not be accepting an allegiance to a different nation because there are certain dangers. No, thank you. What are the dangers? A certain complacency. Generations, like if a Palestinian accepts a citizenship, their grandchildren will no longer be Palestinian. They will identify as whatever Arab nation they happen to find themselves in. It doesn't allow for these Palestinians to then have incentive to return to Palestine and come up with bright ideas as to how to solve the conflict that we have there. Instead, we have these bright ideas being festered in these different Arab nations. But what we do want is we want a sense of unity. We want to bring these people back and have a sense of unity. Just as the Israelis had done and they had formed their own nation, we think that unity can only be achieved when you have a national identity. And that national identity is being stripped when we have Palestinians accepting citizenships from different countries. We do think that for the individual that this may benefit them, and if they have job security and if they can provide for their family, great. But there's a greater ideology at risk now, and we're doing this at the expense of the rights of the individuals for citizenships. We're saying that the problem, the conflict that everyone seems to be avoiding, that there's not only a complacency between the Palestinians, but there's a complacency in the Arab nations themselves. Jacob Yusuf, a politician who comes who comes into certain Arab nations when there's no conflict, when there's no apparent conflict between those Arab nations and Israel, who travels away when there is a conflict. So these Arab nations generally talk around the issue and they do not address the issue. But if I have a mass amount of people, even refugees who haven't accepted residencies, because that is not, it is, no thank you. They do not have to accept residencies in these countries, but we find that there are a lot of refugee camps. So the Arab nations will then have to address them rather than try to pacify them by giving them off citizenships and then feeding into Israel's greater motive of division and taking over the entire state. So how does our motion achieve this? Is that it prevents an allegiance to different countries and it allows a unified front of the Palestinians. Also, another thing is that the forefront that's spearheading the resolution of the conflict will no longer be by groups like Hamas and Fatah. We'll get rid of that polarity. Instead, we'll have a greater ideology of people who are educated, who are coming together in a unified front to come up with better resolutions as to how we can fix the problem. And we're saying this that we can even do this at the expense of their freedom of a citizenship because this is a special case in which we have a conflict and that we are at the risk of losing the idea of Palestine as a state. People are losing the sense of having Palestine back as a state. People are not understanding the conflict anymore because they're distantly and physically removed from it. And when you're distantly and physically removed from something, it's very difficult for you to be involved in it. Yes, you can read up about it, but it's not the same as being there and feeling your country and feeling the grounds of your country. So for these reasons, we beg to propose.
I'd like to thank the speaker for her speech. I'd like to call our first speaker from opening opposition, Mr. Sarim Zia.
All right, so it's an interesting debate. It's a topic that's been breached a number of times. We've all heard about this debate in its many different facets before. It tends to be a very emotional debate, which is what we saw from the government today. Let's take a minute, be sensible and calm about this, and think about it from an open perspective. How has the Prime Minister proved or shown me a link as to how giving a Palestinian a citizenship to another Arab country removes him any more than they are at this present moment? Now, again, I'm not going to say there's a right or wrong in this case. The idea is what is more important and better for these individuals, and that is what we have to consider. Now, in our case from the opposition, we believe, and we appeal to the government to listen to this argument, we believe that it is economically and socially better for these individuals who have been displaced because of this tragedy. We believe it is better for society in which these individuals reside currently, that these societies will benefit, and these individuals will benefit because of the society. And a third thing that we strongly believe in is that the issue itself, the issue of the Palestine-Israel two-nation theory and all of this, will have a better response from all Arab nations because of our proposed policies. And I will show you, and then Arwa will take on the third argument and show you how it is better than being stateless for these individuals to achieve all these three ends. In terms of rebuttal, now, they talk about the disintegration of a nation, but what makes that nation they don't really address. They talk about how being stateless is somehow in the interest of these individuals, but they don't really clarify how, while being residents, they enjoy certain benefits that citizenship will deprive them of. Again, the onus is on the government to show me that by giving them citizenship, we will deprive them of privileges and benefits that they will be that the citizenship will bring to them. That the government absolutely does not address. Now, they talk about two or three things which are just largely assumptions and nothing more. What they talk about is Palestine as a nation. Well, if you're physically and distantly removed, as she said, you cannot champion the cause. Well, since 1948, people have been living in refugee camps, Yarmouk refugee camp, where they don't get water to this day. It's been around 54 years, yet they live as refugees in other nations, and yet somehow they're still not distant and physically removed from the place. Well, that's a technical flaw in your statement. The idea is they're still removed. What we want them to do is be able to come together as part of the society that they're living in and be politically active, be eligible for political activism within these societies through citizenship, and then champion for their cause for a Palestinian state, which will be part of my debate. They talk about a united front. How can you be united when you're dispersed into refugee camps? You do not have a mobility within these states. You do not have mobility in certain places. We're not saying it's a general case. Yes, there are Palestinians who are living good lives. Let's look at the larger picture. Let's look at the individuals and the principle and the morality of it. Well, the idea is they do not have a united front, which they will attain to a greater degree, not to the absolute degree, but to a greater degree given citizenship in these nations. And the third thing they talk about, that they fail to talk about, is the difference between residence and citizenship that I will show you in my debate. So moving on, how is this better economically and socially? Remember this. For the individuals, it is better because they will have more security and stability in their lives, which is what they lack right now. Giving them a resident status still leaves them prone and vulnerable to deportation on no charges at all. People don't even have the means or the protection from the legal system, yet they say residency gives them some form of protection or shelter. What form is that? never explain. Well, give them the rights that each citizen in that country enjoys, so at least they're not threatened on a daily basis by issues like deportation, by issues like a lack and deprivation of rights, which they do suffer from. It's a reality we're all aware of. Yes, sir.
Are you saying that if you're threatened in your own country, the best solution is to go and move to another country?
The point was these individuals who have refugee status are threatened. I'm not saying they should move to another country. What I am saying is they should be given more protection through citizenship within that country. Please follow my debate. Come on. Now, what we want is for these people to not stall their lives and live with this illusion or dream that something will happen someday. The problem is they've been living in this they've been living these static lives for the last 54 years, and now it's time that we give them some permanence where they reside. Let's move them away from the refugee camps and into their homes, or give them some sort of permanence that they deserve. Let's give them that individual identity. Now, they say that this identity, this united front, will be lost over the years. We beg to differ. On a societal level, we believe that when these people are given the right to be politically active through the right means, through the legitimate means, and not by taking up arms or being forced to take up arms out of frustrations, out of a lack of rights, out of poor living conditions which they're subjugated to, if you give them, please sit down, if they're given the right means and channels to be able to voice their concerns, be politically active part of parliaments, then in the longer run, in the future generations, the people will be more aware of the Arab cause, and please sit down, and there will be more, and this passive action that we're waiting for now to happen, that these static lives that Palestinians live in other countries where they don't know what their future is going to be, they don't know when the Palestinian state will be formed for them to be able to be a citizen of some country of this world. We need to do that now so we can give them that sort of political activism and active channeling for that cause. Now, the idea is we want some social security for these individuals within the societies that they reside in. We're not asking them to be moved. They've been living in the society. Society has accepted them. They've been integrated into part of the society. We all accept it on a daily basis. Let's just formally put a stamp to it, and let's formally pass this legislation, because let's accept it. We're just making this easier for ourselves by depriving these people of rights, by turning a different face. But through our proposed policy, what we say, it's better for the individuals, it's better for them in terms of social protection and social network within society. And as Arwa will show you in her part of the debate, that it is better for the Palestinian cause in the long run. That is why they deserve citizenship. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the speaker for his speech, and I'd like to call our second speaker from opening government, Mr. Muntasir Al-Tohami. Here.
We heard something quite interesting from the quite condescending opposition that seemed to ignore most of the points that we've laid out and decided to go on their own tangent. We don't believe that if you become a Qatari politician that all of a sudden you're going to decide that you're going to solve the Palestinian issue. That if you become an American citizen and now have to take up arms against Palestine because you're an American citizen, you'll decide to protect Palestine. This is the basis of their motion. This is the basis of their whole argumentation, and it falls in just a few seconds. Now, before moving on to my own substantive material, I'd like to refute some of the points that were brought up by opposition. They've talked about the difference between residency and citizenship and how we've not clarified that. We've actually clarified it very clearly, and is our main argument. The difference between granting residency to somebody, which also grants you legal protection, is that you're not granted. You don't have to have allegiance to that country. You don't have to take up arms against Palestine if Palestine is attacking that country. What does this exactly mean? An example: say I become an American citizen, right? That means if America is in war against Palestine, even though I'm Palestinian, I have to take up arms against Palestine. If I am a resident, I do not have to do that. This is something the opposition clearly failed to understand. Right, and they've also claimed that you'll become politically active to citizenship. Have not explained to me why you can't protest if you're a resident. You can still protest. You can still go to the street and protest. There's no difference between this and that in terms of you being able to become politically active and pressure these groups. And therefore, his point doesn't stand at all. As a matter of fact, we believe that if you are granted the citizenship, you'll become complacent. All the rights are granted right here for you. We've pacified you. You've officially become American. You don't need to worry about Palestine. This is what they stand for. I don't believe that if you're granted all the rights the Americans have, why would you feel motivated about going back to Palestine and the Israeli conflict? There's no motivation for you whatsoever to go back. So this point also falls. They've also talked about how refugees will need to be granted citizenship. Again, they don't miss, it's strange for Georgetown students not to understand how this works, actually. Refugees can be granted residency and live within the country safely and be provided the legal rights. No, thank you, sit down. And they've also talked about how this residency will feel like it's not that citizenship. And we say simpler to this, you are granted the same legal rights. The difference is that you do not have allegiance to the country. I'll take your point.
So am I exposed to the same risk of deportation, or can I run through the
But sir, thank you for your point. Actually, the fact that you're exposed to the risk of deportation will motivate you further to push for the Palestinian cause. This is the complacency they're put in place for us here, ladies and gentlemen. They're providing all this service and goods and supports from the other countries that the Palestinian will not feel motivated to go back to his home country. They're taking the Palestinians away one by one, person by person. And the individual does not realize that his actions is not only affecting his life, but affecting Palestine as a whole. And therefore the state will fall, and Israel will rise, and the one-nation state or a two-nation state will not stand in the future. No, thank you, sit down. They've also talked about how the Palestinians are already stateless in their POI from Ottawa. They've already stated the Palestinians are stateless. This is an issue we have to solve, right? This is why we're here. This is why we're debating this, right? They do have identification cards. They do legally identify with Palestine. It is an observer state. You're saying, hey, they're stateless. Forget about them. We don't need to solve the issue. So what does that mean for the debate? It means exactly nothing. And they've also talked about how they're physically removed from the area if they're refugees or if they're residents already, right? And we believe that, again, the difference between you being physically removed and complacent and the difference between you being physically removed and nostalgic is a huge difference. If you want to go back home, if you have a reason to go back home, if you don't feel like this is your home, you will try to go back home. You will try to unite yourself and the people to go back home and solve the problems you have at home. And now I'll be moving on to my own substantive material. No, thank you. Sit down, Orwa. Right. Where did I put my lovely substantive material? I don't have it on me. Right. Oh, yes, I'll take your point while I look for my substantive. Oh my God. Yeah, what's your point?
So do you recognize that for you to participate in war with Palestine, you would have to basically get involved, get army training and get military training? But just being a citizen of the country doesn't really imply that you've got to take part in war with Palestine?
There we go. Thank you for your point. Actually, it doesn't. When you're a resident, you don't have to go to the military. You're not obliged to go to the military, so that point does not stand. And now moving on to my own substantive, which is the brain reclaim that we will have in Palestine. What does this exactly mean? When the smart people, the country, the rich people, the people who are able to leave and grant citizenship from other countries leave, what happens? Brain drain. All the skills and abilities that can revive the nation to be able to establish a one-nation state, Palestine as it stands on its own. If anybody can just leave and be granted citizenship somewhere else, all the skills will be drained. All the problems will not be solved. Most of you do not realize this, but Israel runs everything in Palestine. They run the economy, they run the markets, they even have the currency. The shekel is the currency of Palestine. If we have these Palestinians come back from all these countries all over the world, we will gather the skills and the abilities to establish our own economy, to establish our own markets, to establish our own professionals, and be able to run the country and be able to establish ourselves. No, thank you. Sit down. And this will also increase external pressure on the Israel state to come about to a solution. How will this how will this exactly happen? The Palestinians now can run themselves, right? The Palestinians are now united. That there is external pressure from these Arab nations because there's protests happening in these Arab nations and nations all over the world. And now there's an end in division because these people feel united under one cause, right? There's no need for the polarity because in greater number we find mediocrity, right? And with greater number we find greater ideas and with greater solutions, we'll be able to come up with a better solution for the conflict that is occurring right now. And now we also have to look at the aftermath of the conflict. If this conflict is solved, as opposed to all these people just who are alleged to these countries, who have citizenships, will not be able to immediately just drop their citizenships, right? If you are an American, you will not drop your citizenship even if Palestine is established. And therefore, Palestine will not be a strong state. But see, if Palestine is established and you do not have citizenship from external countries, now you will be alleged to go back and be aligned with your country and help solve the problems there. And now what have we told you, ladies and gentlemen? We've told you a simple thing, that a nation was established on the basis of people uniting, and that was Israel. Now we need to establish Palestine once back again, and we can only do this through unity. The Palestinians can run themselves, the Palestinians are united, and through the external forces, we will win. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the speaker for his speech. I'd like to invite our second speaker from opening opposition, Ms. Arwa El-Sanosi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Unlike team opening government here, we're not willing to settle for second best. We're not willing to sacrifice the lives of the Palestinian people because, you know, somehow, someday, one day, Palestine is going to actually be an official state and everyone is going to live happily ever after. What we want to do is that we want the betterment of the Palestinians, of the Arab societies, and of the Palestinian cause today, so that we would actually ensure that future that they want so badly. Now let me tackle the points that have been come out of opening up so far. They somehow created a correlation, although they did not prove it, that citizenship is actually going to lead to the loss of the original identity. To that I have two responses. Palestine, as a legitimate sovereign state, does not exist. Yet, we have millions identifying themselves as Palestinians, whether they have the citizenship or not. So the whole identity that citizenship somehow cancels where you come from, I don't understand where it comes from. We still have African Americans identify themselves as African Americans, knowing where they come from. So their idea of dual citizenship and dual identity is not mutually exclusive under our side. Apparently it is. You either have to be one thing or the other under team proposition. Pan-Arabism is a principle that they did not hear of and they obviously do not want. Now let's talk about what else they have talked about. There's the whole identification of Palestinians and what you can and what you can't be. So let me tell you about the status of Palestinians in terms of identification today. They're either residents, they're either refugees, or they are holders, or they're citizens, or they're holders of travel documents. Residents and holders of travel, if you are a resident, you either have to have a passport of some sort, or you need to have a travel document. Obtaining a travel document for a Palestinian is a nightmare, merely because of the mere fact that they are stateless. We think that is a factor that they ignore, that they want you to think and believe that every Palestinian has some sort of an identification on them. And that's exactly why we have the problem of right of return, Madam Speaker. Now, moving on to why being a refugee specifically is problematic. We think that the state of the Yarmouk refugee camp in Jordan is horrible. We think that that's exactly where they want to shove every Palestinian into. We think that because of that the states no longer feel that they have an obligation towards the Palestinian question, that they're willing to put them into these refugee camps and ignore them. Otherwise, if they are citizens, they actually have rights. These kind of rights are that residents do not have. A right and obligation that the government has to provide for them and not throw them away, which is what is happening. But even when it comes to residency, we think that citizens have more option to get into certain jobs that residents do not have. Influential jobs, Madam Speaker, because that is the status quo of the Arab nations and you cannot ignore that. So once you become a citizen, we think they become more powerful. And when they become more powerful, that's when you create the actual change on the ground. And that's what I'm going to address in my substantive. But lastly, they talked about the brain drain. And you know where the brain drain is? It's in the refugee camps, Madam Speaker, where most of the educated guys from the West Bay are in the Yarmouk camp, where most of the women are actually in the refugee camps, stuck and have no way out. Because that's what a refugee status is, Madam Speaker. It's only a movement up of an asylum seeker, and way moves down from being an actual human being. Now let's come to what we provided you on. Actually, yeah, Monty.
Yeah, you see the problem with the refugees in Jordan has to do with the policy of the Jordanian government. It has nothing to do with the Muslims.
Exactly, and what happened because of that? We think that that is a general pattern or trend in all Arab states with all refugee camps regarding specifically Palestinians, since they are the majority of refugees in the Arab region. We think that that is the leeway that governments have today because they have no system of checks and balances that we're actually going to create once we grant Palestinians the citizenship. So Saddam already talked to you about how this is better for, or how giving citizenship is better for the Palestinians. We think that we told you how, travel documents and refugee status only hinders them from having jobs and from having decent lives. But more importantly, they're not considered citizens. They're not considered human beings because they have no point of reference, Madam Speaker, and we think that that is problematic. When we give them citizenship, you solve for this stateless dilemma, Madam Speaker, that we have. But that already was dealt with Saddam, and we got no response to that. But what I'm talking to you about today is how this is actually going to be better for the Palestinian cause as a whole. Madam Speaker, the Palestinian Liberation Organization was created in exile. The Palestinian Liberation Organization is the sole representative of the Palestinian people, Madam Speaker. These are the people who actually got the recognition of the international society because they were outside, because they got the help of these international countries, and even the opposition. Ahmed Mish'al resides in Qatar, Madam Speaker. We think that because he has this alternative option of having another citizenship, that gives him this option that any other Palestinian does not have, that then gives him the idea or the opportunity to be an influential figure and actually influence society. So because they become recognized with their citizenship due to citizenship rights, such as voting, especially with the new coming of the Arab Springs, we see more hope for Palestinians who are citizens to actually take say or have say in their future. We think that the involvement, once they become citizens, they're more involved, or they're more able to actually be involved in leadership positions socially, such as Azmi Bishara and him creating the Al Jazeera station, or even the Research Center for Arab Studies. He becomes the point of reference, Madam Speaker. Politically, we think the existence of Palestinian Jordanians in the parliament is what actually opened the King Hussein's bridge when the crisis happened in the West Bank. We think people like that who are Palestinians, who hold citizenship, that actually bring change to the ground. But what does happen to the Arab nations under our policy, where you actually give people citizenship, is that Arab nations have a history of expulsions of Palestinians and avoiding the situation, either passively or actively. We think passively, the expulsion of Palestinians after the Gulf War, after the second Gulf War from Kuwait, actually ended up very badly with grievances and divides and distance from the Palestinian cause. And these Palestinians were residents. If they were citizens, that wouldn't have happened. And that's exactly what we want to integrate them, Madam Speaker. We want to give them citizenship, we want to give them vote, we want to give them a voice, and we want to make them human beings.
That concludes the opening part of our debate. Now to kick off closing, we have our Member of Government, Mr. Zuhair Said.
Good evening, Madam Speaker. Fight for nationhood, fight for statehood, and betrayal. These will be my three main points for today. But first of all, 2 points of rebuttal. The two main things that we have had from the opening house of opposition has been that once these Palestinian citizens get citizenships of other Arab nations, they'll be economically and socially better. And secondly, what they've been saying is that these refugees need to get citizenships because they'll get benefits, right? Let me address the first point. They keep telling us that they'll be socially and economically better, but these are vague terms, Madam Speaker. How will they be better? I'll tell you. Who will it be better for, right? getting the citizenship will be better for these Arab host countries, because once these refugees become their citizens, all these Arab countries will have is cheap labor, because that is what we have seen has been happening in these Arab countries where these Palestinian refugees emigrate. Secondly, second point of rebuttal, right? They say that once these refugees get their citizenship, they'll have benefits. Well, let me tell you something, Madam Speaker. We as human beings and people as Palestinians stand for something much better and much bigger than benefits. We do not want the Palestinian nation to give up their identity in terms of benefits, because we believe that human beings and the Palestinians stand for something much bigger than that, right? And we will not negotiate citizenship and certain benefits. And we will not negotiate our identity in the shape of a new passport and petty benefits that an Arab host nation throws at us. No, thank you. Let me move on to my substantive, Madam Speaker. First of all, fight for statehood. What you need to realize here that the fight for Palestine is in two forms, right? It's a fight for statehood and a fight for nationhood. We're not fighting for an idea like feminism or women's rights, Madam Speaker. We're fighting for physical land in physical form, right? And for land, for a piece of land, you need people. What has been happening in the last 60 years, right? In the last 60 years, since Israel came into existence, this piece of land has been shrinking. And unfortunately, with this piece of land, the number of people who belong to this land have been shrinking. And this is something that we believe is wrong, something that we believe is unfortunate, and something that we believe needs to stop. And this is why we believe that Palestinians need to stay as Palestinians rather than converting themselves into Jordanians and Syrians and whatnot. And why do we need to preserve this? And why do we need to make this stop, Madam Speaker? Brings me to my second point, which is the fight for nationalism. Now, what do Palestinian citizens do by accepting the citizenships of other Arab countries, right? They accept defeat. What you're saying is that another more powerful power, right? The Israeli state, backed by foreign powers, they invaded us, they came on our land, they established their country on the basis of power. And you're saying that they were right. Why? Because we cannot fight them anymore. What we will do is we'll move to other countries. And this is step-by-step transition, right? We'll leave Palestine first, we'll move to Jordan, we'll move to other countries and establish ourselves as refugees, and then we'll get citizenships. What you're doing is establishing defeat. And we believe that this cannot be done so, because the Palestinian cause is stronger than that. I'll take Sarim.
Yes, so your identity is somehow mutually exclusive with citizenship. It's basically the South Park gnome problem, where step 1, citizenship, step 2, step 3, defeat. You have absolutely no claims, no links, and yet you're just making these big assumptions.
Okay, let me tell you how accepting the citizenship kills Palestinian nationalism, right? Because once you move to this country and once you give up your citizenship, what happens, right? You're giving away your identity, you're giving away your culture and heritage. Because you know what? You might believe yourself to be Palestinian, but what happens in the next generation, right? A couple of generations later, there is not a shred of identity left in you. And the only thing, and we fear that by Palestinians keeping on taking nationalities from other countries, the only shred of Palestinianism that will remain is the black and white Gatra and the Dabke dance. We want the Palestinian cause to remain, and that cannot remain without Palestinians keeping themselves Palestinians. Let me move on to my third point, Madam Speaker, which is betrayal, right? What happens to the people who are in Palestine once their brothers move to refugee camps and once their brothers and sisters accept citizenships from from other Arab countries, right? What does this do to the morale of the people who are fighting, to the people who have been fighting for their lives and their generations before them? It kills their morale. Not only does it affect the people who are living in Palestine, it affects the cause as a whole. Why? I'll tell you. No, thank you. So we know that the fight for Palestine is important because these people need to get their homeland, right? However, their efforts and all the efforts of the people before them who have died are wasted, because once these people move to foreign Arab countries, what is the message that's going out to the rest of the world, right? What they're saying is, okay, so these people from Palestine, they make a big deal about not having land, but once another country offers them citizenship, they take their citizenship, which means they're not serious about this cause. And we believe this sends a very wrong message, and therefore it negates the cause of people who are still fighting for their land. And this is why we believe that for some people who accede to Arab nations giving them nationality, they kill the cause that people on that land have been fighting for decades, which is why we believe that this should stop. I'll take closing.
So you would consent to a world where the international community forces disadvantaged refugees to fight for a blind sense of nationalism where they have no alternative to do anything else?
But that's the problem, right? What they believe is that it is a blind sense of nationalism. What the opposition has actually done is already given up on the Palestinian cause, which is why they're saying that this sense of nationalism is blind and this sense of nationalism does not exist, which is why we want Palestinians to get their passports from other countries and then live in other countries, because we believe that we've already lost. We on the government side believe that we have not lost, Madam Speaker. Now, moving back to my points, right? Talking about betrayal. I've already shown you how this reduces the morale of people in Palestine, right? Now let me show you how, by offering them these passports, the Arab governments, right? These Arab countries are also taking the easy way out, how they're betraying the people from Palestine. So these Arab countries, by the definition of being Arab, right, are supposed to help their Palestinian brothers. However, what they're saying is that we know Israel has taken over you, but you know what? We cannot fight them. We cannot waste our resources on fighting Israel. So a better way is, come into our land, we'll give you a passport, because you know what? We can fight for your land. We'll just let you live here. And Madam Speaker, it's not like people who immigrate into these countries are treated as equal citizens, right? Because we've seen over the years what happens. What they're literally doing is moving from their own land, from being one marginalized community in their homeland to being another marginalized community in another country. Because even though they do get the nationality right, they're never treated as equal citizens. And we saw this happening in Lebanon, where people in Lebanon were coexisting peacefully, right? But what happened, right? After a while, the refugees and the people who had immigrated from Palestine became in such a large number, it led to a civil war, and it became a religious war. But essentially what was happening was the local people were fighting Palestinians because they felt that they were outnumbered. What have I told you, Madam Speaker? I have told you that this is a fight for land, and we need people for land. Secondly, I have told you that it's important for Palestinian nationalism to survive, that people do not get the citizenship of different countries. Thirdly, I have told you that by this betrayal of other Arab nations, and for the people who are getting these citizenships, it's killing the Palestinian cause. And for all these reasons, we are proud to oppose this motion. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the speaker for his speech, and I'd like to invite our first speaker from closing opposition, Mr. Hayyan.
I'm happy to get such a good support from the crowd, even though I do not belong to this country, and I'm a foreign citizen. So thank you very much. To begin with, the side proposition has been carried away with unnecessary things. The idea is that what are we here talking about? I would want to begin with Farah. She talked about this idea that how Israel came together after being disseminated in different parts of the world. We are talking about the same when we talk about the state of Palestine. We are saying that the way the atrocities that were done by the Nazis, by committing all these atrocities against the Jews, they were thrown out of the country. They were forced to go to Europe. They were forced to go to the U.S. And what happened there? They get the citizenship of Europe. They get the equal rights of Europe. They get equal rights in the U.S. They get international global support, and then they get the state of Israel after they get the state of Israel as a result of an adjustment that was done by the British Empire of that time and the United Nations. Please have a seat. So I just don't see that how does the argument even apply. They talk about this idea, that the last speaker talked about this idea of cheap labor. Ladies and gentlemen, why is there cheap labor? Because they're not given equal economic opportunities. But our model is ensuring that they get these equal economic opportunities. If a Qatari gets to drive a Land Cruiser, he gets to drive, I don't know, a Porsche, but whatever is equal should be distributed as such. Because if I come to this country, I am willing to forego my cultural and I make an economic investment, I make a personal investment in this country, I should be treated as equal. Please have a seat. I should have the right to be treated as equal. That's my right, because I am committed to this country. I'm committed to the economic development of this country, and I should be given equal rights under that model. Please have a seat. So now I'm going to give, so those are the 2 points of extension that I'm going to mention. The number 1 point of extension is how Israel, the state of Israel came together and became an independent entity. And this is how we look at the state of Palestine in future. So the second point is that how the lack of identity leads to criminalization and leads to organizations like Hamas. And as a result of them, give them the justification to commit illegal crimes all around the world. To begin with, the international, as I said, that as, yeah, sure.
Israel came together through Zionist unifying movement, not through granting citizenships all over the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, they have repeatedly questioned the identity, the loyalty of these people who take foreign citizenships. These Zionist movements, as they call them, were basically tortured and persecuted in the Arab world by the Hitler. And as a result of that, they were forced to go into a different territory, into a different land, like the Europe. They become the citizens of that country. They become the citizens of that country. What gives your country is not perhaps unity, but strength. You need to be strong to get that country. If you do not exist in this planet on this planet of Earth, and you're treated as aliens, what right can you have as an alien as opposed to having a right as a human being? You need to be recognized. Your identity is the most important thing. Identity is a social construct, ladies and gentlemen. It is determined by several factors in the environment. Please have a seat. It is determined by several factors in the environment. Environmental circumstances determine my identity. And as a result of that, environment should also recognize me. This is what we ask for on this side of the table. Ladies and gentlemen, I would want to give you, basically the first point, we need to understand that an Israeli citizen could go to International Criminal Court and say that crimes of humanity are being committed against me. Under what law and under which identity, under which umbrella could a Palestinian alien, for that, according to their model, would go, and to which court would he go? Because he's not being recognized under any territory. How would he go to the International Criminal Court, for that matter, and complain to the International Criminal Court that these crimes of atrocity are being committed against me, and who is going to be responsible for that? Opening, please.
To the Palestinians in Palestine that are not under any state, to which international law do they go to file their complaints?
Ladies and gentlemen, the idea is that you have to be recognized as a citizen for you to go to the court or for you to appeal to different organizations. For instance, look at the example AIPAC, right? Jews have this organized body, AIPAC, that could go and speak for them. They're now the citizens of the US, and they have a lot of control, a lot of influence on the US foreign policy, right? They determine the Palestinian policy and all of that. Now, how is that happening? It's happening because Jews have American citizenship. They're still as loyal to Israel, and they're still bringing about the change within Israel by being in a foreign land, by basically being in a position of power, by being in a position of strength, and by being in a position of recognition. Ladies and gentlemen, what we need to recognize is Palestinian statehood is not existing at this point. Why? Because they're not strong. They are weak. They do not exist in this world because they do not have an international identity. The Palestinian state is not being recognized to begin with. We need to give the identity to these people in some shape or manner so that they could go and talk for themselves and talk for the state of Palestine. Please have a seat. Ladies and gentlemen, the last point, the idea of criminalization is very important. The idea, I would want to go back to the border areas of Pakistan and Afghanistan. What happens there? Afghans migrated in 1980s as a result of the Soviet invasion. They were never given the nationality of Pakistan, right? Please have a seat. They were never given the nationality of Pakistan. What have they been involved in, ladies and gentlemen? That border area of Pakistan has been labeled as the safe haven of this earth. They've been involved in terrorist activities. They've been involved in marijuana. They have been involved in all the drug trade. They cannot vote for the Pakistani president, nor can they vote for the Afghan president. Who is going to determine their future, ladies and gentlemen? Who is going to determine their future? Their future is what would determine the identity of Afghanistan as a whole, and that is what we believe is also happening in the case of Hamas. Why is Hamas able to get all these different weapons from across the globe? Because of these illegal immigrants, which you cannot try under any criminal code. You cannot. How would you treat? If there's an illegal immigrant that does not exist in the papers, how are you going to go and try them in the criminal court? How are you going to bring them in front of the law and tell them that this person is illegally supporting Hamas and other terrorist organizations in the country? To sum up, ladies and gentlemen, we brought you two extensions to begin with. We brought you to this idea that how Israel came together as a result of foreign acclimatization. They took nationality in foreign lands, they took nationality in foreign countries, and yet were loyal to the idea of Israel. And we believe that Palestinians, that is the model that Palestinians should follow, so that they could get international recognition, international support, their cause could get a global voice, and now because they are voiceless and they are anonymous. The second question that we brought to you was the idea of criminalization is extremely important. If you will not recognize them, they would be demotivated. They would not get the economic opportunities and would be forced to be convicted, to commit crimes and provide illegal support to the different terrorist organizations. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank the very popular Hayan, and I'd like to invite our last speaker from Closing Government, Ms. Valerie.
First off, let me just say that I am proud to represent CMU in the final national debate championship. First off, let me just echo the words that you could hear from the streets of Gaza. Palestine is my home. These very words are etched in murals. You could hear it in the dying sounds of many people fighting for this very cause. But I have identified 3 clash points in this debate. First, what does it mean to be a citizen of a country? Second, the life of it in and of itself. And third, the consequences of getting a citizenship once you actually do get it. First, what does it mean to be a citizen? On side opposition here today, they said that it will bring you benefits. You know, the fear of deportation would go away. Your passport will be recognized. Yes, you will have better travel opportunities. Yes, you will lead somewhat of a good life. But we believe that citizenship is more than that. We believe that it's about identity, where you come from and who you are as a person. Where you come from has to do culturally, religiously, and ethnically about who you are. But what we're trying to say here is that we're getting rid of the fight for nationalism. We're saying that it doesn't care anymore. Sit down, sir. And they said, how are we going to unite the people if they're dispersed in refugee camps? One answer, Mr. Speaker, and that is nationalism. We are fighting for nationalism. Palestine, one of the earliest civilizations, home to many origins of many religions. We're giving up hundreds of years of heritage and culture. For this specific instance, we believe that you shouldn't just give up your citizenship for Palestine. That the culture and heritage have existed for so long. If you let go of this, people are letting go of who they are and become someone else. Sit down, sir. They said that African Americans still identify themselves as African Americans, but Mr. Speaker, they identify themselves mostly as Americans because they do live in America. And then at most it creates a clash of identities. What we are doing here by giving up and becoming another citizen to another country, we're robbing them out of this rich ancestry. People are citizens of country because it is who they are. It outweighs whether you could be American and get a visa on arrival or live in a big house. This cause is bigger than the individual itself. It fights for heritage. It's fight for something bigger than that. Sit down, sir. Let's just say, even if you do go get even if you do get the citizenship, right? What you become is you become part of a marginalized community. You become you move from one state of marginalization to another state of marginalization. What does this mean, Mr. Speaker? What it means is that if you go and live, if you're a Sudanese and you go and live in Rwanda, what this creates is that you create more majority and minority groups. Governments has then to accommodate your needs as a minority, and this causes problems to reach a consensus, and conflict arises in that country. So not only do you lose your identity, but it also causes the problem of where you live. It's a lose-lose situation, Mr. Speaker. Sit down, sir. Actually, I'll take you. Sorry.
Well, thank you. So no. So wait. Being given these rights, the fact that the government has to give them rights creates a lose-lose situation for them. Well, because the government has to do something. How
okay. Yes.
the status quo worse?
Okay. Yes. How are we gonna fix the status quo? Okay. Which nicely blends me on my second point, which is life. They said go to the United States, find a better life for yourself. You'll have a decent life. But that only solves the problem in the short term, Mr. Speaker. The state is because it avoids the problem. The problem is that the state, the country in of itself, is in a crisis. By staying staying, you're solving the problem in the long run, and we are fixing the problem. How are we fixing the problem, Mr. Speaker? We are buying them a good life for years to come. We are staying because we are not betraying our brothers. We are not betraying the country. We are not, by leaving, we are lowering morale. The fight has been going on for years. People have lost loved ones for this cause. So if we leave now, what was it all for? The only way we can afford to fix a problem is if we stay strong as brothers and sisters and stay when your country needs you the most. It's when they need your help is that your true citizenship comes, because that's when the country needs you the most, and that's when you should stay. Sit down, sir, miss. Okay, third of all, the consequences. They said that there might be like a lack of identity, which we do not believe, and this would create groups like Hamas. But we believe that it doesn't cause a lack of identity. It happens because people are fed up of the situation. People are fed up of living this way in years to come. But no. If we do give up our citizenship, what ends up actually happening is that when you take up a citizenship, what ends up happening is an easy way out for the other Arab countries. They're saying, yep, we don't need to solve the Palestinian-Israel problem anymore. We're lessening the very weight of it, which is exactly what we don't want. We need to fix the issue by staying. If you're staying and you go on, sit down, sir. If you're staying, then then you're fixing the country of itself. But if you do leave, what ends up happening is that it's going to create more groups like Hamas, because people are going to get more fed up of how the country is, because no one is actually fixing it, because everyone just took the easy way out. The citizens took the easy way out. The country took the easy way out, and also the countries that were supposed to be your allies let you do it, and they took the easy way out as well, which is exactly what we don't want as a country when our country needs us the most. Yes.
Madam, the Arab states were the ones who fought Israel. The question is not a Palestinian-Israeli question, it's an Arab-Israeli question.
But you cannot deny the fact that the very situation that the Palestinians find themselves in is because of the Palestinian-Israel issue. And if we do not solve the problem in the very roots of it, and only solve it at the shallow levels, then what exactly are we doing? So what have I brought you today, Mr. Speaker? I have brought to you today the very meaning of what is citizenship, that is about where you come from and who you are, and the life itself, the life for the long run, the life of staying for your country and fighting it out for the very end, and also the consequences if this actually happens. For all of these reasons, CMU is very proud to represent in the nationals. Okay.
I'd like to thank the speaker for her speech. I'd like to invite our last speaker for today from closing opposition, Mr. Ahmed Almir.
Thank you. So, we on side opposition believe fundamentally that every human being deserves to have a home, and every human being deserves to identify to a certain national identity. And we believe that that holds true even where your identity is eroded from you, and even where your country is damaged to the extent that you cannot return to it. We believe that if someone's home burns down, you can't provide them another home, and you can allow them to identify with something besides that which they have lost. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about the principle here of allowing people to define their identity. And we have 3 points of clash on the side of the House. First and foremost, how is national identity truly defined? Secondly, the idea of pacification versus protectionism. And thirdly, the idea of playing the blame game. Should we blame Israel for what's happened? And should we try and reinstate Palestinian people in Israel and prove that they are wrong? Or should we try to move on? And should we seek for diplomacy? And should we seek for more long-term beneficial outcomes? So first and foremost, what side proposition told us is that this is not a two-state solution. The problem is that you're losing Palestine as an idea. And that's exactly the point. Palestine is becoming an idea because it has become so eroded in the minds of those who live in Palestine. Because they are consigned to refugee camps. They are consigned to being asylum seekers. They are consigned to being impoverished. And they have no alternative in a country where they have been overrun and they have nothing left for them. What we are saying is that Palestinians have the choice now to move, and if they so choose, to seek another identity where that identity can be more advantageous to them and where it can provide them an alternative to the horrible truth that is the Palestine that they see here, the crumbled ideology of what Palestine used to be. Now, what we said on this side of the house is the economic disadvantages of not being an immigrant, because you're not a refugee anymore. You're not an alien. You're not somebody who's seeking refugee status or looking for a work visa to survive in a country. You have independence, and you, through that independence, can do one of two things. You can choose to become powerful and go back and truly fight for your country, which, as we've proven empirically, did work in the case of creating Israel in the first place, which negates their arguments fully. But also, if you choose, you can adopt a new identity. And the truth of the matter is, so many people do this all around the world. Whether or not the ancestors of Qatar did come from Saudi or Iran, I have the right today to identify myself as Qatari because I truly believe that I can be Qatari today, and that's what I identify myself as. What we said on this side of the house is that this principle is paramount. And what they're saying on that side of the house is it doesn't matter, because nationalism is something that you should hold on to, even where that nationalism is blind, even where the country doesn't really exist in any sort of economic or political or social realization, because you should be national to the point of death. You should be national to the point that there is nothing to gain from a Palestine which is so war-torn and ravaged that there is nothing that you can get out of it. I'll take closing.
So are you saying that Palestine no longer exists?
I'm saying that Palestine legally doesn't exist. And if you do want to blame Israel for existing, and you want to force Palestinians to accept that they are Palestinian and they have no alternative but to be Palestinian or die in a refugee camp, then you, Mr. Speaker, are not providing them any alternatives, and that is not a source of diplomacy. What we're talking about here is protectionism. It's not pacification. We're saying that the international community, the Arab community, does have an obligation to provide rights to these people where they do not have any other rights alternately. We are saying that these people aren't poor, they're not begging, they're not trying to get a passport because they're trying to take advantage of the society. They have nowhere else to go. So what's wrong with protecting those people, and what's wrong with saying, yes, okay, if you don't have a home to belong to, then you can't belong to our home. We accept the extenuating circumstances. We're not trying to blame anybody for this, but what's best for the Palestinians is giving them an alternative and giving them something to opt towards. And that's what we want to provide on this side of the house. That side of the house would rather force them to follow this idea of shadow nationalism, because that's going to recreate the Palestine which has already been destroyed. Our third point of rebuttal is again this idea of blame, this idea of assigning blame and therefore assigning this nationalistic idea of trying to force people to go back to a state. And we've said already on this side of the house that this isn't really whole sway, because the fact of the matter is, even if these people are in Palestine, we think that there's the sense that people who are in Palestine are going to fight for Palestine intrinsically because they have no other alternative. Because they realize that if they do move out of this country, they have to be refugees, or they have to be unemployed, or they have to be illegal immigrants, or they have to seek asylum. And we think that because of that, they have the only option of trying to seek nationalism, trying to fight against the regime which they cannot fight. And we don't think that that's really beneficial. And what we've heard from this side of the house is this idea of losing Palestine as an idea. And that truly Palestine is only an idea. And the fact that Palestine is being eroded and we want Palestinians to fight back, when Palestinians don't have the capacity to fight back. What we're saying on this side of the house is that the fact that we need to provide Palestinians with an alternative. Your motion does not provide the most beneficial outcome, either short-term or long-term, for the Palestinians. And what they said on the lower side of the house, is that, I know this is really it's a fight for statehood. It might be difficult, but it's a fight for statehood. But again, you're engaging yourself in the blame game by saying that you're fighting for something which is inherently right. We're not forcing you to make that decision. We're not forcing you to decide if it is right to fight for nationalism. If you choose to, that's fine. But we say on this side of the house that blame and that assignment is not important. What is important is what has resulted because of it and what we can do to solve it. And what we brought you on this side, on the lower side of the house, is that Israel was a state that was created out of a unified Zionist movement. Because of that, we have shown that even if these Palestinians do change state, do change nationality, there is a mechanism by which they can potentially come back and reinstate Palestine if they so choose to. But if they don't choose to, then that's perfectly normal, because national identities are fluid, because different groups from different countries do migrate, and Pakistan was allowed to separate from India, and Qatar was allowed to separate from Iran and Saudi, because people are allowed to self-actualize and identify who they are. What they're trying to chase is this idea of nationalism, which is going to force you to be impoverished, and force you to be hungry, and force you to live in a refugee camp, and drag your children and your family through poverty, and have nothing, just because you want to fight for an idea which is defunct, an idea which doesn't benefit anybody. And you say that this is the easy out option. But as you contend nationalism is such a strong motivator for your actions, then leaving behind Palestine would not be easy on our side of the house. And we accept that. That is not easy to do. But we do realize that it is the most favorable outcome for these people. And we say that it is important that nationalism exists. But if nationalism can define itself to be something else beyond Palestine, and it can achieve beneficial outcomes for the people who truly are the focus of this debate, then we see every reason why we should oppose. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all the debaters for a wonderful debate. It was truly exciting. I'd like to invite the debaters to cross the floor, and I'll hand over the mic to the MC.
To move on with proceedings, I'd now like to invite Dr. Abdul Latif, the Education Programs Manager, to say a few words.
Ladies and gentlemen, very good evening. Looking back on my experience of being here at Qatar Debates, of working as the Education Programs Manager, I've come to the realization that of the many lessons that I've learned, I would like to pick one in particular, and that is specifically the experience of speaking in front of the masters of eloquence, the masters of oratory, and the masters of public speaking is not quite a good experience to enjoy. So if I matter or master, you know why. And do excuse me, you know who to blame. Thank you. I'm pleased to be here once again to say a few words at the end of this university debating season. It is most appropriate that this forum is held at Qatar Debate Center. This organization is very well known in the region, and Qatar in particular, for pioneering the spread and promotion of debate and all the diverse debate values and uses of debating as a strategy for, number one, valuing the spoken word, 2, deepening respect of difference, 3, broadening tolerance, and 4, reducing misunderstandings, and the list goes on. Since its inception, Qatar Debate Center has taken the pledge to promote the art of debate and enhance the skills of debating. I believe Qatar Debate Center has succeeded in honoring that commitment. And we take pride in that. This gathering, I'm confident, is a proving ground for the key role that the spoken word can play in addressing some of the most pressing problems that our modern societies are faced with constantly. On this closing event, I believe that you now have something to take home, something to cherish, something to reminisce. Along with your academic achievements, you have something to be proud of, and that is a whole set of wide-ranging, lifelong, and transferable skills. Of course, this comes with a responsibility. The onus is on you all, as well as us, to share and transport the values of constructive dialogue, informed debate, and debating to others who most need these skills. Congratulations on taking your oratory, eloquence, and public skills to the next level. Congratulations to you all on becoming better persons, and congratulations to you all on becoming new agents of change. In closing, a thank you note to all of you, students, judges, coaches, coordinators. A thank you note also to all our guests based in Qatar, and especially to our esteemed guests from Kuwait. Thank you. I would also like to extend my sincere thanks to the Executive Director of Qatar Debate Center, Dr. Hayat Al-Ma'rafi, and to all my colleagues at Qatar Debate Center. Thank you, and a very good evening.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And now to move on to the awards announcements, I'd like to invite Tasneem to announce the winners of everything.
Thank you. It's very interesting to see a long list of winners that we're going to announce today. Everyone is very excited to find out who will be the champion. I'm going to keep you in a little bit of suspense, as I love to do. First, I will begin by announcing the top 10 speakers. And in order to announce the top 10 speakers, I'm going to split them into two categories. First, I would like to invite Mr. Ali Al-Sultan, who is the communications manager, to come up and hand over the awards for the first portion of the top 10 speakers. I started this speech by saying interesting because it is very interesting. We have 8 individuals who are tied at the 10th position. So I will recognize all 8 by calling them down and taking a lovely group photo. So the top 10 speakers: Mr. Fahad Al-Khatir from Georgetown, Mr. Ribal Turjaman from Cornell, Miss Lama Obaid from Cornell, Mr. Omar Subaisi, also from Cornell, Ms. Nawal Mir from CMU, Mr. Rafiq Mohammed from Texas, Raza Mohammed from Texas A&M, and Zuhair Syed from CMU. Congratulations. We also have in 9th position from Cornell, Mr. Ala ad-Din al-Sayed. Tied in 7th position, both from CMU, Mr. Yusuf Akhlaq and Ms. Valerie Garcia. In sixth position, from Cornell, Mr. Hayan. I'd like to thank Mr. Ali Sultan, and I'd like to invite Mr. Jamal Al-Bakir, who's the head of the events manager. We have 3 individuals tied in 3rd place. From Cornell, Mr. Muntasir Al-Tawhami. Also from Cornell, Ms. Farah Al-Sayed. And from Georgetown University, Ms. Arwa Al-Sanosi. In 2nd place, also from Georgetown, Mr. Sarim Zia. Thank you. I'd like to thank Mr. Jamal. Oh. Thank you. And I'd like to invite Dr. Hayat, our Executive Director, to give away our Best Speaker Award. So is it a male or a female this year? And can you guess which institution they represent? Ladies and gentlemen, the best speaker of Qatar University Debate Nationals from Cornell University, Mr. Ahmed Almir. Congratulations. I'd like to invite Dr. Hayat to stay on stage, but I'd also like to invite Dr. Abdul Latif to come forward to give the awards for the champion and runners-up. It was a very intense discussion that we had, obviously due to the excellent quality of debate that we all saw here tonight. And I would like to start by congratulating all teams for a wonderful final. The runners-up, on a 5-2 split decision, the team from Opening Government, Cornell FM. Could the coach of Cornell please come down? Could we ask the coach of Cornell to come down, please? There. Congratulations. Congratulations. And for the moment many of us have been waiting for, the champion of the 7th Qatar University's Debate League champions. On a unanimous decision, our champions this year are the team from opening opposition Georgetown University. Congratulations. I'd like to thank Dr. Hayat and thank Dr. Abdul Latif, and I'll hand the mic over to Alex.
Congratulations to everyone, and thank you very much for taking part this year. We hope to see many of you again next year. There's one last thing we'd like to do, which is ask you to join us for a group photo, if you would, up front at the stage. Thank you.